Long before cars, roads, or even carts, humans had a problem. Everything had to be carried by human hands. A short journey could become a painful one. Then humans noticed something interesting. Some animals could carry far more than a human could. But these animals were not waiting to become transportation. They were wild, powerful, and unpredictable. So humans had to learn before they could depend on them. They watched where the animals went. They watched what the animals ate. And slowly, fear began turning into curiosity. But nobody knew yet where this curiosity would lead. Because the real breakthrough would take generations. And the donkey was only the beginning. Humans soon realized that watching animals was not enough. They needed to understand them. Which animals were calm? Which ones were aggressive? And which ones could tolerate humans? This was the beginning of a very long experiment. At first, humans simply followed the herds. They learned where the animals found water. They learned where they found food. And they learned when the animals became restless. Slowly, humans became better at predicting their behavior. But getting close was still dangerous. One wrong move could send an entire herd running. So humans had to be patient, because trust could not be forced. Eventually, some donkeys stopped running away. That small change was incredibly important. Humans could finally get closer. They began offering food. The animals began associating humans with safety. Generation after generation, this relationship grew. And then came a remarkable idea. What if the animal carried the load? It could carry more than a person. It could travel long distances. And humans could save their own strength. Transportation had just changed forever. But donkeys were not the answer everywhere. Beyond the grasslands waited a harsher world. And that world had a very different animal waiting. The animal on the horizon looked completely different. It was tall, strange, and surprisingly calm. Humans soon noticed something remarkable. The camel barely seemed bothered by the heat. It could walk across dry land for enormous distances. And it could survive with very little water. For desert travelers, this was extraordinary. But the camel was still wild. Humans had learned this lesson before. You could not simply walk up and take control. The humans had to earn its trust. They watched the camel's habits. They learned when it became restless. They learned when it was calm. And slowly, another partnership began. The next challenge was simple. Could a camel carry a load? Humans started with small bundles. The camel carried them without much trouble. So the loads became heavier. Soon, one camel could carry what many people struggled to move. Distance suddenly became less frightening. But humans wanted even more. They discovered that a person could ride too. At first, riding was probably awkward. But humans learned how to balance. They learned how to guide the animal. And eventually, entire groups could travel together. These journeys created something new: caravans. Goods could now travel between distant communities. And the world suddenly felt much smaller. Donkeys and camels had changed how humans moved. But their greatest value was not speed. It was endurance. A human could only carry so much. An animal could carry the burden instead. That meant humans could travel farther. They could carry food beyond their villages. They could transport tools and supplies. They could cross difficult terrain. And camels opened routes through the desert. Communities that once felt impossibly far apart became connected. People began exchanging more than food. They exchanged ideas, stories, and skills. Animal transportation was becoming part of civilization. But humans were only beginning to discover its full power. As generations passed, humans became experts at animal travel. They learned which animals were strongest. They learned which animals were easiest to guide. And they learned not to overload them. Every journey became a lesson. The animals had their own limits. Good travelers learned to respect those limits. Soon, long-distance journeys became more organized. Travelers planned where they would rest. They searched for water before entering the desert. They followed routes that others had discovered. And those routes connected entire regions. Donkeys dominated many shorter journeys. Camels became masters of the long desert journey. Together, they transformed the way humans explored the world. So, did humans really discover donkeys and camels? Not exactly. They discovered their potential through patience, observation, and generations of experience. Donkeys became dependable partners. Camels became the champions of the desert. And together, they carried humanity farther than human legs could. They carried food. They carried tools. And most importantly, they carried connections. A village could meet another village. A trader could cross a desert. And ideas could travel farther than ever before. But this was only the beginning of human transportation, because humans would soon build something that changed transportation forever. But how did humans go from carrying things on animals to inventing the wheel? That story is even crazier. Humans soon realized that watching animals was not enough. They needed to understand them. Which animals were calm? Which ones were aggressive? And which ones could tolerate humans? This was the beginning of a very long experiment. At first, humans simply followed the herds. They learned where the animals found water. They learned where they found food. And they learned when the animals became restless. Slowly, humans became better at predicting their behavior. But getting close was still dangerous. One wrong move could send an entire herd running. So humans had to be patient, because trust could not be forced.